Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mallory Roth, and I'm here with the Columbus Chamber, and we're excited to bring you our first webinar of the year, the Hidden HR Risk Costing Small Businesses Time, Money, and Trust with our friends at Ahola. So, in the next few minutes, I will pass it over to our friends James Turner and Terry Wolfong. So, JT and Terry, I'll let you take it from here.
All right. All right. Do we want to give people a couple more minutes for people to get into the meeting, or do we want to go ahead and get started?
Go ahead and wait one more minute.
All
Looks like they're just about everyone in the waiting room is in here.
right.
Okay, JT, that everyone in the waiting room has made their way in. So I'll
All
continue
right.
to watch.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining myself, the Columbus Chamber, and Terry Wolfong for our webinar this morning on the hidden HR risks costing small businesses time, money, and trust. Again, my name is James Turner from the Ahola Corporation. We'll be joined by Terry Wolfong, one of our HR consultants here from our proactive HR team. So we will be going through an agenda here today for, again, the HR risk costing small businesses time, money, and trust. If you would like to ask any questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat and we will answer them at the end of the call. I'm going to go ahead and get going. All right. So again, James Turner. I've been with Ahola for a little bit over 3 years now as a human capital management consultant here with the team. I've been in the industry for about 5 years. Again, Ahola's been here in the Columbus area for around six. Regional director Christy Ernst is our team lead, and she has built out a team of four different consultants here. And Terry Wolfong, I'll let her introduce herself.
Yes, thanks, James. My name is Terry Wilfong. I'm an HR consultant here at Ahola, and I have over 20 years of human resources experience.
All right. And we will get moving right along into our agenda. So, the Ahola Corporation, we are a family-owned company based here in Ohio, out of Brecksville, which is up near the Akron, Cleveland area. For anyone who is familiar with that area, so we're approaching almost 60 years in business here in the state of Ohio. So, when it comes to state, federal, and local tax, we've built a lot of great relationships with the different tax agencies here. So you can trust if there ever is any questions that you have on tax, Ahola would be able to answer those questions and take care of you there. We have processed over 60,000 payrolls annually, over $4 billion in ACH. But we offer services for the entire life cycle of an employee, from hire to retire. We have partners in the healthcare space. We have partners in the 401k space, as well as workers' comp. So we're able to provide you with a service that fits your needs. And today, with the service that we're going to be discussing, is our proactive HR service and how we're able to mitigate some of these problems that are available in that area. And this is available for both payroll clients as well as those who just need HR assistance. So, for our agenda today, we will be looking at understanding HR risk in small business, why risk shows up as businesses grow, the most common compliance gaps, reducing risk without overcomplicating HR, and then also at the end we will get when to get additional HR support, and then again we will have a Q&A at the end for you all to ask questions for Terry and I. Legal disclaimer: the webinar is informational, educational purposes only, does not constitute legal advice. Readers should not rely or act upon any information presented on this webinar without seeking professional legal counsel. So we'll continue right on and get started. Terry, I'll kick it on over to you.
Okay, great, thanks. So, what are we talking about when we say HR risk? So, most companies don't get into trouble for what their intentions are, right? They get into trouble for what they don't realize they're actually doing. HR risk isn't just about lawsuits, it's unnecessary exposure. And this is created by inconsistent decisions, outdated policies, managers acting without guidance, and most HR risk starts small and unintentional. So we're going to talk about why small businesses are exceptionally vulnerable about this. Usually with small to mid-sized companies, they don't have the bandwidth necessarily. They don't have necessarily the resources. And again, so that means they normally don't have a dedicated HR team. So HR responsibilities usually are added to somebody else's full plate. And compliance can easily become reactive versus being proactive. And being proactive is exactly the space we want to be in. Secondly, rapid growth often outpaces the structure. So even if you're trying to keep up with compliance, adding to your HR department, a lot of times it goes too quickly. So policies, documentation, and pay practices don't always evolve as the team expands. And what worked with 5 individuals, employees, doesn't work with necessarily 25. And of course, as you get bigger, that's more of an issue. So there's also the issue of long tenured employees being treated differently, having informal arrangements, or, you always hear like, that's the way we've always done it. And it can create inconsistencies and potential risk. And finally, many decisions live in conversations and are not documented. Without clear paper trail, it's difficult to define decisions if issues arise. So, and all of this for small businesses makes them more exposed. Even like I said, even when they are trying to do the right thing. Next. Okay, so here are some statistics that can show about how serious HR risk really is for companies. So we see here that HR compliance challenges small businesses face, insights on compliance funding, enforcement actions, and the EEOC relief amounts. So MarketBiz, the HR compliance and legal issue statistics from 2025 show that HR professional challenges and frequency of employment-related lawsuits. And this can be, very expensive and very, very time-consuming. So these statistics highlight just how real the HR risk is, especially for, like we said, small to mid-sized businesses. Nearly half of small businesses report that their compliance efforts are underfunded, and 1 in 3 face some type of enforcement action in the past year. And that tells us that many organizations aren't intentionally neglecting compliance. They simply don't have the resources or the structure to stay ahead of it. So, from a financial standpoint, the impact is significant. In 2024 alone, the EEOC recovered nearly 700 million for workplace discrimination claims. That's a powerful reminder that compliance gaps can quickly turn into costly consequences. We're also seeing complexity increase. Over half of HR professionals say that struggle to keep up with constantly changing employment laws. When regulations evolve faster than internal processes, risk grows. And perhaps the most striking, 1 in 5 organizations face an employment-related lawsuit each year. That's not rare, that's commonplace. The takeaway is simple. HR risk isn't hypothetical, it's measurable, frequent, and expensive if not managed proactively. So, and a lot of times you'll hear, but we've always done it this way. Well, that can be a real issue, especially when we see that policies are either outdated or they don't exist. So,
Mhm.
and again, while you're growing, policies that have worked for smaller, amounts of employees need to be updated. Things are always evolving, especially with HR law. Exceptions can't get made, but the documents don't keep up. So what do you do with that? What worked, like I said, when you had less employees is just not going to work for the future. So with growth, it increases the complexity of the situations that you're in. So you need more supervisors, more decisions, more variables. Without updated policies and consistent documentation, that complexity turns into exposure. So it's not growth that creates risk, it's growth without updated structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this slide is one of the I guess reasons I hear a lot is we've always done it this way for
Mhm.
small to mid-sized
Right.
businesses who are family owned as well. They have a way of operating that they've done so for 25, 30 years, and they believe that everything is just kosher and that they're able to just continue on the way they are. But like Terry mentioned, with policies being added on as you grow from that 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 50, and even to 100, you want to make sure that those different policies are staying up to date, and you're staying compliant, not just for yourself as a business owner, but also to protect the business first and foremost.
Absolutely. So, and one of the most common risk factors that we see um, is assuming that strong performers automatically make strong managers. Technical skill and people management are two very different competencies. Many managers are promoted because they're excellent at their job.
Mhm.
And while that's true, um, they still need to be trained to lead the people. So as a result, documentation is often avoided. Difficult conversations feel uncomfortable, so issues go undocumented until they escalate. So, and some managers also overshare, not realizing that they are discussing things that are confidential matters. They can be venting frustrations or speaking too candidly without understanding the potential of the implications. And perhaps most commonly, they try to be fair instead of being consistent. So fairness feels personal and flexible. Consistency is structured and policy driven. From a complex compliance standpoint, consistency is what protects the organization. Now, and without training and guide rails, even well-intentioned managers can unintentionally create significant risk. Next, thanks. So policies that exist but aren't followed. So this is another one of our big areas of risk, is that the policies are missing. Policies that exist are not being followed. An example of this would be PTO rules may be clearly outlined in the handbook, but managers may make exceptions informally. Over time, these exceptions become the norm, and now the written policy no longer reflects actual practice. You see this again in attendance. So attendance is very another commonplace. One manager enforces it strictly, while another manager is flexible. So that inconsistency can lead to claims of favoritism or discrimination, even if none was intended. And discipline is often handled case by case without clear guidance. Now, while flexibility can feel thoughtful, inconsistent discipline is often the fastest way to create like legal exposure. So, from a compliance standpoint, the biggest risk isn't always having no policy, it's having one that isn't applied consistently. Consistency, excuse me, is what protects the business.
And speaking of PTO rules being ignored, it's again one of the bigger areas that we see that require some attention when someone does decide to utilize our HR services. Most businesses will give a PTO allotment to their employees and say, hey, you can use up this amount of time and you can either use it or lose it, but also you're able to possibly go into the negative a few amount of hours before you have to be able to accumulate those hours. So detailing these rules and detailing this information into your policy handbook or somewhere for your employees to be able to view is very important so that they know the rules of how to be able to utilize their PTO without being forced to not be able to use it at a time where they actually may need it.
Exactly. Okay, so this brings us back to lack of documentation. Performance concerns are discussed verbally, but nothing is put in writing. There are no written warnings, no follow-up summaries, no clear record of expectations or improvement timelines. From a manager's perspective, it may feel like they've addressed the issue multiple times, but if there's no documentation, legally it did not happen. When termination or disciplinary action occurs without a paper trail, the organization has little protection. It becomes one of the person's word against another's. So documentation isn't just about being punitive, it's about clarity. It protects the company, but it also protects the employee by clearly outlining expectations and giving them an opportunity to improve. So without documentation, even defensible decisions can be risky. So we always say if it's not documented, it didn't happen.
Right.
Next. So here's another issue that we come up with, that we've come across quite frequently, is an outdated or inconsistent handbook. And this happens a lot in small to mid-sized companies. Many companies created a handbook once, like many years ago, and never revisit it. But employment law changes all the time, and you really do have to keep up with that. So wage and hour rules, leave laws, harassment standards, remote work policies, all these evolve. If your handbook doesn't reflect current law or actual practice, it can create more of a risk than protection. So, and again, like we said, inconsistency is another issue. For the handbook says one thing, but managers operate differently. That gap becomes exposure. In a dispute, the written policy may be compared to what actually was done. A handbook should be a living document, and it should align with current laws and align with real practice and reviewed regularly. If it's outdated, it's not a safeguard, it's actually a liability. Next, thank you. So we see this a lot too, and this can cause some problems with wage and hour. It's a misclarification, and it's actually one of the most expensive compliance mistakes a business can make. And again, it really is extremely common. This includes like misclassifying employees as exempt when they don't meet the duties or salary thresholds. And this is important because there are two tests. So treating a non-exempt employee incorrectly for overtime purposes or classifying workers as a 1099 independent contractor when they legally should be W-2 employees. Titles alone, a lot of times the companies think that, well, if I call this person a certain title, that it makes them exempt. But that's not true. It's duties as well as salary, the wages that a person earns. And many organizations assume that, paying this certain amount is an automatic. That's not true either. Again, it's a dual test that has to be meet all the criteria. So with independent contractors, the risk is even higher. So agencies look at control, supervision, and the nature of the work relationship, and not just what the agreement says. So misclassification can result in back wages, unpaid overtime, penalties, taxes, and audits. And it's real commonplace for them to pull 5 years of payroll records. So it can be very time consuming as well. Next.
Yes.
So, and again, we see a lot of this inconsistent discipline and going back to the documentation that creates legal exposure. When similar behaviors are handled differently between employees, even like we said, when it's unintentional, it opens up the door to claims of favoritism, discrimination, or retaliation. So often the issue is not the bad intent, it's the lack again of structure. One manager gives a multiple verbal warnings, another moves straight to termination. A third documents everything carefully. There is no unified approach. So here we see without consistent documentation, it's also very difficult to defend employment decisions. So if a termination is challenged and there's no clear record of prior coaching or corrective action, the organization appears reactive rather than thoughtful or proactive. So consistency does not mean inflexibility. It just means that you're applying clear standards and documenting these decisions appropriately. So, leave of absence missteps, this is another common one. So, first, failing to recognize when FMLA applies. That's huge. Sometimes manager views time off as a simple attendance issue when in reality, the employee may be providing enough information to trigger FMLA protections. So, if you don't recognize that, we risk interfering with protected leave rights. So, this is something that, again, where training is very important. Secondly, medical information being shared inappropriately. Medical details should only be handled by HR and those with legitimate business needs to know. Supervisors should never discuss the diagnosis or conditions with others. Confidentiality violations can quickly turn into legal claims. And third, inconsistent approvals for time off. When one employee is granted flexibility and another is denied under similar circumstances, it creates both moral issues and potential discrimination risk. The key takeaway in this is leave administration is one of the fastest ways to create legal exposure. So, consistency in the documentation, proper processes are critical, as well as training. So, some other gaps that we find pay practices. Off the time work, auto deducted lunches, and bonuses not factored into overtime. So, and manager behavior, creating exposure, that can be done by casual comments, text messages is one that we found, jokes or venting their frustrations, poor handling of performance conversations, and not responding properly to complaints. So, waiting too long to act, investigating informally, and no follow-up documentation. And again, these are areas where we need to have training done. It needs to be a united, consistent front on how managers and supervisor are approaching these issues.
Yes, and a couple of these different gaps here, gap 6 and 7, I want to highlight here is gap 6 again is one of those very casual, areas of concern that a business may see as, oh well, we're all so close, we're only a group of like 10 to 15 people, but
Right.
this is something that just happens on a daily basis. But you never know when a joke may be taken too far, or a casual comment could offend somebody to where now, if there's nothing in the handbook that does protect the business is now in jeopardy because a simple policy isn't put in place or the
Right.
handbook hasn't been acknowledged by employees. And then gap 7, again, this is all just about being proactive. Again, the name of our service is proactive service, to make sure we're acting prior to anything occurring and making sure the business stays safe, compliant, and is ready for any situation that does arise.
And you're absolutely right, because we're not talking about, that the intent was necessarily bad. It's just being uninformed, lacking structure, and lacking
Mm-hmm.
training.
Yep. Yep.
So, according to HRmorning.com, nearly 42% of payroll errors involve missing or incorrect overtime pay. So, this highlights a major risk area for HR and compliance. Again, these mistakes not only affect the employee trust, but can also lead to violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act and legal exposure. And these are really tough because, again, you do not want wage and hour to come in because it's going to cost you a lot of time as well as money.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and outside of just this being an HR or compliance risk, is this also um, will lead to turnover, right? Any employee that feels like they're not
Exactly.
able to trust their employer to pay them on time or even pay them accurately, it leads to turnover. And
Yes.
turnover has a lot of reasons, rhymes and reasons as to why people will leave the business and look for employment elsewhere. But being paid incorrectly, of course, I don't think anyone's going to be mad if you overpay them. But someone
Right.
being underpaid is going to be a real reason why someone will want to find employment elsewhere.
Oh, you're exactly right. And the trust factor is huge. And you've seen in studies across the board that having trust in your employer is one of the biggest factors in retaining your good
Mm-hmm.
employees. Okay, so we talk about all this risk. So how can we reduce the risk without overcomplicating HR? Because sometimes people think like, oh, we don't necessarily have all the resources for this. Does everything have to be done at one time? It can be very overwhelming. So in reality, what we need to do, what matters is having a clear process and applying them consistently. So consistency is what protects you, right? So you also don't have to fix everything at once. There's just no way that you can actually do that. Focus first on the highest risk areas, wage and hour, like we just talked about, leave administration, complaint response, and manager training. These areas are most likely to trigger claims. So practice realistic improvements done consistently and reduce more risk than complicated policies that no one follows. So, what actually needs to be documented? This is something that is really good to talk about because people can really get afraid of documenting things. They're not sure how to do it, how much has to be done. So, first, performance concerns. If you're having conversations about missed deadlines, the quality of work, behavior concerns, or failure to meet expectations, those conversations should be documented. Documentation, again, doesn't have to be lengthy, but it should be clearly outlined and what the issue is, what improvement is expected, and the time frame. Second, attendance issues, patterns of tardiness, excessive call-offs, or policy violations need consistent documentation. If it's not written down, it's very difficult to defend it later, especially if termination becomes necessary. So, and third, policy exceptions. Anytime you make an exception, so whether it's flexible scheduling, remote work assignments, extended leave, adjustments, you really need to document why. Without the documentation, again, this could actually look like favoritism or discrimination later. So, finally, complaints and your response. It's bad enough to document the complaint, but you must also document what you did about it. So, when was it reported? Who investigated? What was the outcome? The general rule is simple. If it affects pay, performance, policy enforcement, or employee relations, it should be documented. Next. So, what we're going to do is talk about policies versus practices. So policies are what protect you legally. They outline your official position, your rules around attendance, leave, conduct, pay, complaint procedures. They demonstrate intent and provide a framework for compliance. If you don't have clear policies, you're exposed from the start. Now, these practices are what protect you operationally, okay? So practices are what managers actually do day to day. How they apply attendance rules, how they handle complaints, how they communicate performance concerns. And here's where many organizations actually run into trouble. The policy says one thing, but the daily practice looks different. When policies and practices don't match, risk increases significantly. In a legal setting, it's not enough to say it is in our handbook. It is, if it's not consistently followed, it weakens your position. So the goal isn't to create more policies. The goal is alignment, making sure what's written matches what's happening in real life. The alignment is what is where true risk happens. So, like we said earlier, so how do we approach this? When prioritizing HR risk, not everything carries the same level of urgency. The fix it now items are high risk. And the employer's classification areas can lead to, like we said, wage complaints and penalties. Pay practices directly impact compliance with wage and hour laws. Manager training is critical because managers are often the ones creating or preventing the risk. And your complaint response processes must be clear, timely, and again documented to reduce exposure. Now, on the other side, on the fix later side, these are still important, but they're at a lower risk. Like enhancing policies are nice to have, or improving internal processes for efficiencies. Like I said, they matter, but they don't create the immediate legal exposure. So the goal is to focus on what costs you the most financially and legally and build from there. So signs of HR risk is growing and that, we ask everyone to pay attention to is if you have an increase in employee complaints, if managers are asking the same questions repeatedly, if you are finding that there's fear around discipline or termination, and you hear a lot of, we should probably ask HR. So, what proactive HR support looks like, we give ongoing guidance to our clients. We do manager coaching, we do training, regular compliance reviews. So we make sure that your policies and procedures are in alignment, that you have the newest laws in there, and you know how to apply them properly. So again, what can this do? It's what we like to call ourselves proactive. If we're able to be proactive versus reactive. And it saves a lot of money too, because the cost of these situations, I mean, you have legal fees, settlements, lost time, and damaged culture. So again, we have all these areas that we definitely want to take a look at and make sure that you don't have these gaps.
Yes, you've heard Terry list off a number of different areas to where there could be improvements made on the HR side. And again, it's all based upon priority, right? And so with our proactive HR service, they help you determine which priority items need to be addressed, first and foremost. If it's, ongoing coaching for your managers, if it's employee practice or employee policy, if it is updating job descriptions, updating the handbook, those are some of the main places where it starts at as a foundation for HR. They'll help you determine, okay, where do we need to start from to make sure we're building this foundation on a strong base to continue to build upwards from there. And as far as the cost of proactive support versus what it's going to cost you elsewhere, of course, legal fees, settlements, those equal exactly or straight into dollars, right? Lost time
Right.
equals money. We all believe that as well. But of the four of those, damaged culture is what's going to be the one that will possibly cost you the most, because once you onboard an employee and you find out, hey, they may not be a good fit, or we didn't have our handbook up to date, so now they've either sued the business, or some sort of employment practice law has not been followed. That will lead to turnover, and turnover costs money. Onboarding an employee costs money. So you want to make sure that all of this is buttoned up very tightly, whenever you do have the opportunity to do it. So, Terry, thank you so much for going through the presentation.
Absolutely.
Again, we at a whole we've worked with the Columbus Chamber now for dedicated for almost 3 years now as their partner in the payroll and HR space. And we offer, again, this proactive HR service is not for anyone who just solely needs to move their payroll. If you enjoy where your payroll is at today, that's perfectly fine. Our proactive HR service is available to be direct to you as well. So you can have access to people like Terry to provide guidance to your business, provide guidance to managers, whether it's in the form of training, updating your policies and handbook, your job descriptions, and, providing that extra, strength in the foundation of your HR department. Whether you have an HR coordinator, manager on staff who you would just like to alleviate or relieve them of some duties, we also have, the partner with payroll. So payroll and HR sound like a deal package that you would like to look into more, we're able to handle that as well. So we're here at the end of our presentation. I see we do have a couple of questions here. Mallory, did you want to facilitate some of these, or are you okay if we go ahead?
Yeah, I can read off the first one.
Go right ahead.
Okay, we have When does EPLI coverage become something a small business should get?
Terry, would you like me to take that one?
Okay, so can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, question from Bradley. When does EPLI coverage become something a small business should get?
Okay, so around that, what I would like to do is that if I could get his email, because I would
Mhm.
like to follow up on that because I have a couple other questions that I would like to ask him.
Perfect.
All right. Looks like that may have been one of the only question we had in the chat. Mallory, thank you all so much from the Columbus Chamber for allowing us to put on this webinar for the members who joined us today. We do really appreciate the time that everyone gave us.
JT, are you going to go over the risk assessment though too?
Yes, yes, I'll
Perfect.
do that as we end up here. So, what everyone who attended and was registered for the call today will receive is a copy of this HR assessment. We will, and I have done many of these assessments with clients of ours as well as other businesses around the city of Columbus. Just understanding what the possible risk is to your business, at the current time. So, there's the different areas of compliance, recruiting and hiring, managing employees, as well as workplace regulation and safety. When you get this, please feel free to go through and check the boxes to see which ones does apply to your business. Um, and you will be able to determine which level you're in. Are you in a critical risk? Are you in moderate risk? Or are you at low risk? Any of these areas can qualify you to, reach out to AHOLA, and we can help you better understand what it is that we can do to help your business move forward. Our proactive service is available in both 6 and 12 month increments for you to utilize for yourself and your employees. Um, let's see. We have a couple more questions here. Can we also get a copy of the slide deck? This is available from the Columbus Chamber. Mallory, do you know if they'll be able to receive this?
Yes, yes, we will send this out as well as the recording.
Great.
Okay, thank you so much. And then
We have
Brian
another
Terry has two
question.
questions. What is the correct document number to use for an I-9 form for a social security number?
Okay, so on the documentation, and especially if you have, it's really nice, especially when you have it electronically done, because it actually pulls up what is required, the governmental form to let you know to check. And you can get, a lot of times what we use is exactly the Social Security number. So again, what I do, we have to be very careful though of over documentation, right? Because some people think more is better. And in some cases, that can be true, but definitely not in an I-9 documentation. That can get penalties up to over $2,000 per form. So, again, if I can get your email, I have some information that I can make it really, clear and answer your question where you're feeling comfortable with that. And I'd be happy to do that because I-9s can be one of the heaviest fine, believe it or not, and something that's really easy to correct.
All right. Teresa, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the slide that you were mentioning. Classification, pay
Mhm.
practices, manager training, and complaint response process for those 4 items that need to be fixed now. And then, Brian, your second question, what are recommendations for files for employees when everything is digital? Should we print material and create a paper folder? This is a great question, Terry. I'll
Mhm.
take portions of this. We
Okay, go
always
ahead.
recommend, so when we bring on new clients who have documentation from a previous vendor that they've utilized, I'll say ADP, Paycor, Paylocity, any of the few that are in there, you have digital files there. I would always recommend keeping a digital copy of it, inside of your current payroll system, but also a digital backup, possibly on a hard drive or on a USB disk that could be able to be kept elsewhere. We do have a lot of clients who utilize the manual process and keep print material as well, and just have it in a paper folder as a backup. But we believe the digital one is the most efficient. Terry, would you have anything else to add there?
I think that on the digital, there's a couple of things. As long as you have a clear procedure and process, that helps make sure that you have the most recent documentation regarding the issue, and you can also then make sure that this is not accidentally like shared when it should not be shared. So
Mhm.
it's actually the best one of the best processes to have.
All right.
Any other questions from the group?
All right. Thank you, Brian. Again, thank you again, Columbus Chamber, from Terry and I at Ahola. We appreciate the time. If anyone does have any questions for myself or Terry, please feel free to reach out to me. My email was at the beginning of the slide. It's jturner@ahola.com. I'd be more than happy to either set up time with you to discuss, what we are able to address with you, or if you just have some simple questions you'd like to have answered to put your mind at ease that we can help out with, please just let me know.
And I did just put JT's email in the chat, and I'll put Terry's as well, if that's okay with you,
Oh,
Terry.
absolutely. Thank you.